Hi, everybody. A quick pod lecture to talk about one of the more effective producing tools in Washington, D.C. One of the things that professionals like myself and like yourselves soon rely on almost on a daily basis. And that's the use of think tanks, either their research reports that are used all the times to write scripts, to come up with news topics, to think about things that are trending and new ways of framing those things that we already know about. And also a great way to find guests to be in your documentaries or your news packages or your talk shows. So I reach out to think tanks really all the time, including today. Earlier this morning, I reached out to a couple different think tanks for a talk show that I'm putting together for November 11th. So I try to pre-book my shows, get everything confirmed, reconfirm the days before the shoot, which I will talk about in the class component of the lectures for this week, anticipating all the things that can go wrong in producing. But this is one of the things that's really it's just extremely valuable to producers. And that's relying on the think tanks either here in town or in London or New York or Los Angeles, San Francisco. They're really all over the world, and they're where academics go if they're not going to go to the universities to teach and research. So just another avenue for PhD researchers or very experienced former government officials, scientists, that kind of thing. They all a lot of them flock to think tanks if they're not going to take the more traditional academic path. And very often it's a way to make more money. You know, they can write books from there, they can appear on TV from there. So it's a way to really generate a lot of cash for academics. And so when you see somebody on CNN, Fox, MSNBC, whatever it is that you watch, if they have an affiliation under their name, it's because that they use that affiliation to become, somewhat famous, and then they owe money back to the think tank as part of that relationship. So, anyways, let's move on to actually looking at some of the think tanks that are in this week's lecture. I'll skip the theoretical because we're not in class together. Normally, we would do that. The first on the list is the Brookings Institution, which is a major building in downtown Washington, D.C., near DuPont Circle. Hundreds of people work there, including digital media people. If you guys are thinking about jobs, for example, this might be a really great way to transition into the professional world before you go to grad school. They do all kinds of video stuff, all kinds of graphic design. They're constantly producing brochures, newsletters, books, documents, magazines. That stuff happens on a daily basis there. So Brookings is highly credible. It's a centrist or center left organization, depending on your political positioning, but they're pretty moderate. They try to be fair. They try to look at things from all sides, whether it was the Iraq War, Russian interference in the election, all these big news topics. They're probably doing a lot on COVID-19 because they have a big health section at Brookings. So it's a major place. It's worth, while you're listening to this lecture, to go to their website and see what kind of research they do, what kind of jobs they might have, because it's entirely possible that you guys may include them in your professional work, possibly include them in your student work if you can set up a Zoom with them, or certainly you may interested in being a professional there somewhere down the road. The Washington Institute is another major think tank in Washington D.C. My friend who is the host of the talk show that I produce for the Middle East is the executive director of the Washington Institute, and they think about Middle East policy exclusively. So war in Syria, trouble in Lebanon, peace between Israel and Bahrain, all that stuff is on their radar. And in fact, the person at the State Department right now in the Trump administration that's in charge of Middle East policy came from the Washington Institute, went into government, and is probably going to go back in the next year or two. Um, a lot of them take that path back and forth between think tanks and government. But they're a major source for hardcore foreign policy thinking, um, pro American, but also open to all parts of the Middle East. And they do a lot of really interesting work on those topics. Okay, the oldest in the United States is the Council on Foreign Relations. They're primarily New York based, but they have a beautiful building in downtown DC right by the White House. They do all kinds of foreign policy research, books, writing, thinking, TV appearances, and again, they're a major player in this industry, the thinking industry, and their folks are on television all the time. And this would be again a great place to work, either in New York or Washington or one of their offices overseas. They have an office in China and London, all over the world, really. So that's a great place. Again, go to their website, look at their scholars, look at their areas of expertise, and you may find, like I do, that there's a person that fits into whatever it is that you're working on. So I have put many Council on Foreign Relations people on the air over the years, the decades now, and I go to their website when I'm trying to think about something new to cover. So when you need a new topic, a new story, it's often useful to go into their research and see what's cutting edge thinking and use that to build your show or your segment or your movie, your film, your documentary around that. Oh, Link Tank. I'm sorry, Link Tank is no longer in business. They were a phenomenal um, resource, but now basically you can get the same information from using the AP wires from doing Google searches. You can find these think tanks. One of the things that's great about them is they have daily events, usually at breakfast, lunch, or cocktail hour, and they invite people into these events for free and they feed you. So if you're a 20 something intern down in Washington, just out of college, and you don't have a ton of money, you can go to think tank events basically every day and get a free lunch or free drinks at night and meet really important people, hear super interesting topics. So that's also a really fun component of this is that they generate so much money and it's so important to them that people see their work, read their articles, see them on TV. They generate a lot of money that way as well. That they will just put out these giant spreads of food, cookies in the afternoon, breakfast in the morning, and invite people in to listen to their scholars talk and hopefully make connections in that way. So it's a really social thing as well. And so when I'm in Washington and I'm not on campus and I have a free afternoon, I'll very often schedule my afternoon around a free lunch or a free coffee event, but only if it's something that I'm really interested in. I'm not just going for the free food, although the free food is nice. I'm also going for the event and the hopeful guest on my television show. I don't want to be seen as shallow. So I'm not thinking of it in that way, but it is a really cool thing that's probably unique to Washington. I doubt there's anywhere else in the United States where you can just book yourself into a free lunch on an almost daily basis. Okay, so you see the slide for honoraria, and I'm almost done. Um, Many of these experts do not work for free, and so in almost all cases, they get paid to appear on television or to write their articles. So if you see an interview where someone is listed as, say, a CNN contributor or consultant, that's code for they were paid to be on screen. If they're not listed in that way, if they're not a Fox contributor, Fox did not pay them to be there. They're there to sell books or to get famous or for other reasons to drive traffic to their website. But for the most part, there is a sort of cash exchange in this relationship that's really quite interesting. And again, people can make a lot of money, especially if they get booked for a monthly consulting fee, where whenever Fox needs somebody who's an expert on weapons of mass destruction, they can go to this person who's normally, at the Heritage Foundation up near Union Station and just say, hey, can you come and be on the air for us today at 2? And because they're paid on a monthly basis, they're obligated to go. So it's a way of them filling out their shows a lot of times at very, very last minute. So that is the description of how you can use think tanks to improve the quality of your documentaries, your television segments, your work in general. And I highly advise that you learn that system. Starting with Google, search Washington, D.C. think tanks, and then dive into their websites and find which are the most connected to your political positioning and where you might find a good place to work after you